In the deepest abysses of human experience, where the veil between the tangible and the unutterable thins to a gossamer thread, lie tales that claw at the edges of sanity, whispers from a reality far older and more terrible than our own frail understanding dares to comprehend. And sometimes those whispers coalesce into narratives of chilling retribution, a grim cosmic irony enacted upon those who scorn the sacred and mock the stillness of the tomb. Tonight we delve into one such unsung horror, a chilling vignette from the master of cosmic dread himself, H.P. Lovecraft, a story often overshadowed by the cyclopean horrors of our lyre or the ancient secrets of the Necronomicon, yet one that, in its stark simplicity, delivers a profound and utterly unnerving lesson from beyond the grave. In the Vault. Prepare yourselves, for the sanctity of death, when violated, possesses a voice all its own, a silent, chilling decree from the sepulchre that echoes with a malice far older than time, a testament to forces that may not be cosmic in scale, but are no less utterly terrifying in their intimate, personal vendetta. Our macabre narrative unfolds in the unassuming, quietly decaying New Anwell, a town much like many others that dot the landscape of Lovecraft's New England, a place where the weight of history hangs heavy in the air, a faint scent of forgotten things lingering amidst the modern veneer. But even in such a place where time seems to crawl with a somnolent indifference, there existed a man whose peculiar temperament, a blend of professional detachment and an almost casual disrespect for the solemnity of his calling, was destined to invite a horror that would brand itself upon his soul with an indelible spectral mark. This man was George Birch, the undertaker, a figure whose daily commerce with the ultimate mystery of existence had, paradoxically, bred not reverence, but a kind of cynical contempt, a weariness with the endless parade of the deceased that manifested in a careless, almost cruel disregard for their post-mortem dignity. Birch was not an evil man in the grand melodramatic sense. Rather, he was an indifferent one, a man whose sensibilities had become blunted by routine, whose hands, accustomed to the cold embrace of death, had long since forgotten the warmth of human empathy. And this fundamental failing, this spiritual blindness to the inherent dignity of even the lifeless shell, would prove to be the fulcrum upon which his own undoing would pivot with a ghastly, inexorable momentum. His particular affliction, this casual cruelty, was perhaps best exemplified by his recurring grievance with the storage conditions of the Old Town Vault, an ancient, squat stone structure nestled within the cemetery, a place of temporary repose for those awaiting proper burial, especially during the harsh New England winters when the ground, frozen solid, refused to yield its stony embrace. And Birch, always eager to cut corners, always seeking to optimize his time and effort, harbored a profound and utterly unholy irritation with the vault's rickety entrance, a warped wooden door that stuck persistently, demanding a frustrating expenditure of effort to open and close, an aggravation that, in his weary mind, provided ample justification for a particular despicable act of petty tyranny. It was not enough for the door to be recalcitrant. It became, in his twisted perception, an affront, a personal insult to his professional efficiency. And like many who find themselves vexed by inanimate objects, Birch began to project onto this mere portal a malevolent will, a conscious defiance that demanded in his mind a forceful, almost punitive response. This particular winter had been especially severe. The ground, like granite, and the vault, therefore, had been in constant use, a revolving door for the temporary residents of the grave, and among its cold, silent inhabitants lay a coffin, a simple, unadorned pine box, housing the remains of one Asaph Saw, a man whose life, like his coffin, had been unremarkable. His passing little noted outside his immediate family, yet it was this particular cadaver, this silent, inert form, that would become the unwitting instrument of Birch's terror. For weeks, each time Birch had wrestled with the vault door, each time it had stubbornly resisted his efforts, he had taken to using the most convenient lever at hand, the very coffin of Asaph Saw, pushing, prodding, leveraging the deceased's final resting place against the stubborn door frame. A grotesque and utterly disrespectful act, a desecration born of impatience and indifference rather than malice, but a desecration nonetheless. He would brace the crude coffin against the jamb, applying his weight, a callous disregard for the occupant, a literal trampling upon the dignity of the dead, never once considering the unspoken implications, the potential for an awakening of something ancient and primal that might stir in the depths of the earth, or indeed within the very cold confines of the vault itself, a silent observer to his repeated indignities, a forgotten spark of indignation flickering in the darkness. It was on one particularly frigid day, as the grey sky pressed down upon New Anwell with a heavy, leaden weight, that fate, or perhaps a more ancient, vengeful force, decided to intervene. Birch, having just deposited another casket within the vault's chilling embrace, found himself once again grappling with the recalcitrant door. The air within the vault was thick with the faint, sweet and sour scent of decay, a smell that had long since ceased to register as anything but a mundane part of his working environment, a miasma that clung to his clothing, an invisible shroud he carried into the world of the living. Frustration, a familiar companion, gnawed at him. He pushed, he pulled, he cursed under his breath pluming in the frigid air like ghostly sighs, and then, with a familiar, thoughtless impulse, he once more sought leverage from the coffin of Asaph Saw. He braced himself, grunting with effort, thrusting the pine box against the stubborn frame with a deliberate, forceful shove, the wood groaning in protest, a sound that, had he been less consumed by his task, might have seemed like a whisper of pain. But this time something was different. The ancient stone of the vault, perhaps weakened by time, perhaps by the subtle, relentless shifts of the earth itself, or perhaps by some unseen, malevolent will, decided to abandon its silent vigil. As Birch exerted his final exasperated push, a small but critically positioned stone, worn smooth by eons of indifferent geology, dislodged from the ceiling directly above the heavy iron bolt of the door. It fell with a soft yet utterly decisive thud, landing squarely within the rusted, archaic mechanism, jamming it with an absolute, terrifying finality. Birch, hearing the subtle shift, the unexpected click, released the coffin, his heart giving a small, unwelcome lurch. He tried the door again, pulling with all his might, but the resistance was absolute, unyielding. He pushed, he shoved, he kicked, a frantic desperation creeping into his movements, his earlier irritation swiftly transmuted into a cold, sickening dread. The door would not open. He was trapped. The realization hit him like a physical blow, a sudden chilling descent into an abyss of comprehension. He, George Birch, the master of the dead, was now one of them, albeit still breathing, still warm, yet confined within their cold, silent dominion. Panic, cold and sharp, began to uncoil in his gut. He was alone, deep within the sepulchral confines of the vault, the only source of light, a rapidly dwindling lantern he had brought with him, its feeble glow casting grotesque dancing shadows upon the mildewed stone walls and the rows of silent coffins, each a silent witness to his predicament. He cried out, his voice hoarse, echoing back to him with a mocking emptiness, absorbed by the thick, sound-dampening stone, a mere whisper in the vast, uncaring silence of the grave. He hammered on the door, his fists growing raw, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But the vault, constructed for eternity, was impervious to his puny efforts, its ancient stones shrugging off his assaults with an almost contemptuous indifference. As the frantic energy of his initial panic began to wane, replaced by a creeping, bone-deep despair, Birch's lantern flickered, its oil reserves dwindling, its flame dancing a final morbid waltz before sputtering into oblivion. Absolute darkness descended, a living, breathing entity that pressed in on him from all sides, suffocating him not with physical weight, but with a crushing psychological burden. He was plunged into a void more profound than any he had ever imagined. A blackness so complete that it seemed to absorb all sound, all sensation, leaving him adrift in a chilling sensory deprivation chamber of his own making. The cold intensified, seeping into his very bones. A cold that was not merely atmospheric, but seemed to emanate from the very earth, from the silent occupants surrounding him, a frigid embrace from the forgotten dead. He could smell the damp earth, the decay, the subtle acrid tang of ancient stone, odours that in the impenetrable darkness seemed to become magnified, more potent, more sickeningly real. Each breath he took felt like a trespass, an exhalation of life in a domain utterly dedicated to its absence. Hours stretched into an eternity. Birch paced, or rather shuffled, for fear of colliding with the unseen coffins, his hands outstretched, tracing the rough contours of the walls, seeking a crack, a fissure, any hint of an escape route. But there was nothing, only the unyielding rock, the cold, damp certainty of his imprisonment. His mind, usually so practical, so grounded in the mundane realities of his profession, began to fray at the edges. The oppressive silence was punctuated only by the frantic beat of his own heart, a drum against the walls of his terror, and the occasional imagined sound. A rustle, a whisper, the creak of wood, sounds that his rational mind dismissed as the echoes of his own fear, but his primal, instinctual self could not so easily ignore. He tried to sleep, to find some surcease from the torment, but the dread was too profound, too consuming. Every shadow, every imagined shift in the darkness became a nascent horror, a subtle, malevolent presence waiting just beyond the periphery of his shattered perception. And then, as the very concept of time began to dissolve into a formless, endless present, a new sensation pierced the suffocating gloom, a sensation that was not imagined, not a figment of his overwrought mind, but palpably, horrifyingly real. He had, in his aimless, desperate shuffling, stumbled against one of the coffins, a familiar pine box whose rough, unvarnished wood was instantly recognizable even in the pitch blackness. It was the coffin of Asaph Sar, his tormentor, the object of his repeated, casual disrespect. A shudder ran through Birch, a cold wave of superstitious dread washing over him. He recoiled slightly, attempting to regain his footing, when suddenly a sharp, excruciating pain lanced through his right ankle. It was not a stubbed toe, not a mere bump against the wood, but a distinct piercing sensation, as if something had clamped down on his flesh, a bite, sharp and deliberate, followed by an agonizing tear. Birch cried out, a guttural sound of pure terror, stumbling backward, scrabbling away from the offending coffin, his mind reeling, struggling to process the impossible. A bite? From what? In this place, surrounded by the inert, by the utterly lifeless? His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum solo of absolute, unadulterated fear. He scrambled to his hands and knees, fumbling in the darkness, tearing at his trouser leg, desperate to feel the wound, to confirm the unthinkable. His fingers, trembling violently, encountered something warm and sticky, undeniably blood seeping through his sock. And then, as his terrified mind struggled to make sense of the tactile information, he felt it again, a lingering, disturbing sensation on his ankle, a faint, metallic taste in his mouth, the almost imperceptible imprint of something small, sharp, and utterly unnatural. It was a tooth mark, or rather the impression of two small pointed teeth, eerily distinct, chillingly precise. The terror that gripped George Birch in that moment transcended mere fear. It was a cosmic horror of the most intimate and personal kind, a violation of the natural order so profound that it threatened to shatter the very foundations of his sanity. The dead, the utterly quiescent dead, had retaliated. Asaph Sauer, the forgotten man whose dignity he had so carelessly trampled, had reached out from the depths of his coffin, from the suffocating embrace of eternity, and exacted a terrible, chilling vengeance. The notion was preposterous, impossible, a figment of a mind driven to the brink by isolation and despair. Yet the pain in his ankle, the blood, the undeniable tooth marks, these were irrefutable, horrifyingly real. He huddled in the darkest corner he could find, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps, his entire being vibrating with a profound, primal dread. The silence of the vault was no longer empty. It was filled with unseen presences, with the cold, silent disapproval of every occupant, a chorus of spectral accusations, each one echoing the chilling reality of his violated ankle. His mind, racing through the suffocating darkness, pieced together the fragments of an unthinkable truth. The old tales, the superstitions he had always scoffed at, the whispers of the grave having its own memory, its own vengeful spirit. They were not mere folklore, but reflections of a terrible hidden reality. He had mocked the dead, and the dead, in their own unfathomable way, had chosen to mock him back, to brand him with a mark of their silent, eternal displeasure. The night stretched on, an eternity of agonizing fear, of listening to the imagined creaks and groans of the coffins, of feeling the phantom touch of unseen fingers, of smelling the decay that now seemed to cling to him like a second skin. Every moment was a torment, a slow, agonizing descent into the very pit of madness, etched into his soul by the searing pain in his ankle and the horrifying implications of that impossible wound. Eventually, though it seemed like an eternity, the first faint tendrils of dawn began to penetrate the cracks in the vault door, casting a dim, grey light into the oppressive gloom. Birch, broken, shivering, and utterly traumatized, mustered the last vestiges of his strength and renewed his assault on the door. Perhaps the cold had shrunk the stone, perhaps the forces that had imprisoned him had momentarily receded, or perhaps his desperate raw-knuckled blows finally dislodged the small stone that had jammed the bolt. With a groan of tortured metal, the door finally gave way, swinging inward with a rusty shriek that sounded, to Birch's hypersensitive ears, like a triumphant mocking laugh. He stumbled out into the grey light of morning, blinking like a man returned from the underworld, his clothes dishevelled, his face pale and haggard, his eyes wide with a terror that would forever haunt their depths. The first thing he did, once he had staggered free of the vault's chilling embrace, was to collapse onto the frozen earth, tearing off his sock, desperate to examine the wound in the feeble light of dawn. There, on his right ankle, were two distinct, angry red marks, small puncture wounds, undeniably the imprint of teeth. The flesh around them was already beginning to swell, to discolour, an undeniable, sickening testament to the reality of his nightmare. No animal could have entered the sealed vault, no logical explanation could account for such a wound, in such a place, from such a source. The truth, horrifying and absolute, stared him in the face. He had been bitten by a corpse, by the reanimated, vengeful remains of Asaf-Sar. Driven by a desperate, morbid compulsion, a need to confront the source of his horror, Birch stumbled back into the vault, his lantern once again lit, its trembling beam illuminating the grim tableau. He located the coffin of Asaf-Sar, its simple pine box now appearing to him as a thing of terrible, malevolent power. With trembling hands, he forced open the lid, revealing the gaunt, waxen face of the deceased, a face that, in the flickering light, seemed to bear a faint, knowing smirk. But his gaze was drawn, with an irresistible, sickening fascination, to the mouth. He leaned closer, peering into the silent maw, and there, amidst the pale, immobile gums, he saw it. The two front teeth of Asaf-Sar were noticeably longer than the others, protruding slightly, sharp and pointed, almost like fangs. More than that, they were stained, a faint, dark crimson that, to Birch's traumatized mind, could only be one thing: his own blood, the residue of his agonizing, impossible encounter. From that day forward, George Birch was a changed man. The carefree cynicism, the professional detachment, the casual disrespect for the dead, all had been stripped away, replaced by a consuming paranoia, a haunting terror that gnawed at his waking thoughts and infested his darkest dreams. He abandoned his profession, unable to face another corpse, unable to step foot in a cemetery without feeling the cold, spectral eyes of the forgotten dead upon him, feeling the phantom ache in his ankle, the lingering metallic taste of vengeful blood. The small, sleepy town of New Anwell whispered about him, about his sudden, inexplicable breakdown, attributing it to overwork, to the grim nature of his former calling. But Birch knew the truth, a truth too horrifying, too utterly impossible to ever articulate to another living soul. He carried the mark of the vault not just on his ankle, but deep within his very psyche, a constant chilling reminder of the vengeance of the dead, of the unhallowed power that can stir in the silent earth, a quiet, horrifying testament to the cosmic indifference that allows such retributions to occur, and the profound, terrible irony of his fate. Lovecraft's In the Vault is not a tale of sprawling cosmic entities or interdimensional horrors, yet its power lies precisely in its intimate personal terror, a stark illustration of human hubris meeting an ancient, unyielding justice. It speaks to the universal dread of disrespecting the sanctity of death, the primitive fear that the deceased, even in their silent repose, might possess some lingering awareness, some ability to retaliate against those who disturb their peace. The undertaker, George Birch, represents the ultimate embodiment of such disrespect, his professional familiarity breeding a contempt that blinds him to the inherent dignity of even a lifeless form. His casual mistreatment of Asafsoa's coffin is not a grand evil, but a petty, everyday cruelty, and it is precisely this mundane nature of his transgression that makes the resulting horror so deeply unsettling. The revenge is not delivered by some monstrous entity from another dimension, but by the very object of his disrespect, a silent, chilling uprising from within the confines of the tomb itself. The sharp, unexpected bite from the corpse, delivered in the suffocating darkness of the vault, serves as a brutal, visceral wake-up call, a horrifying testament to the unseen forces that may govern our world. Forces that do not necessarily conform to our neatly ordered understanding of life and death. Lovecraft masterfully crafts an atmosphere of claustrophobic dread, making the vault a character in itself. A cold, ancient, indifferent prison that becomes the stage for a most unsettling form of justice. The terror is amplified by Birch's isolation, his frantic descent into madness as he grapples with an impossible reality, a reality where the dead do not merely rest, but remember, and where their silent disapproval can manifest in the most agonizing and unforgettable ways. The story's ending, with Birch forever scarred, haunted and broken, reinforces the Lovecraftian theme of humanity's insignificance in the face of forces beyond its comprehension, forces that can deliver retribution with a chilling, surgical precision, leaving behind not just physical wounds, but an indelible scar upon the very soul. It is a cautionary tale, a grim reminder that even in the most mundane of settings, the line between life and death, between respect and desecration, holds a significance far greater and far more terrifying than we dare to imagine. The story leaves us with the unsettling question: what other forgotten indignities might be remembered in the cold silence of the grave, waiting for their own moment of terrible poetic justice? The vault, a repository of the inert, becomes a crucible of psychological horror, where the very act of living in a world alongside the dead carries an unspoken contract of reverence, a contract that, when broken, can unleash a chilling supernatural karma far more potent than any earthly law. It speaks to a primal fear, a deep-seated human apprehension that the boundary between the quick and the dead is not as firm, as absolute as we desperately wish it to be, and that sometimes, from the silent depths of that ultimate mystery, something stirs, something remembers, something reaches out to reclaim what was lost or to punish what was profaned. The story's insidious power lies in its suggestion that the greatest horrors are not always cosmic in scale, but can arise from the simplest, most human of transgressions, reverberating through the silent, unforgiving halls of eternity, leaving a mark not just on the ankle, but on the very soul of the transgressor, a perpetual reminder that some debts are paid from beyond the grave, with an interest compounded by the dread of the unknown. And so we close the lid on this particular chilling account, its grim lesson echoing in the shadowy corners of our minds, a testament to Lovecraft's unique ability to find the monstrous not just in the colossal and the alien, but also in the subtle, the personal, and the profoundly unsettling. It makes one wonder about the sanctity of every resting place, about the tales whispered only by the silent earth, and about the forgotten accounts of countless indignities for which perhaps an unseen patient reckoning might still be silently brewing deep within the vault of time, awaiting its opportune, terrifying moment. If you found yourself gripped by the icy tendrils of dread woven into this tale, if the chilling ironies of In the Vault resonated with that primal part of you that recognizes the true horror in humanity's vulnerability and the silent vengeance of the grave, then do us a great favor. Like this video to help us spread these unsettling narratives to more seekers of cosmic truth and forgotten terrors. And to ensure you never miss another descent into the shadowed corners of H.P. Lovecraft's magnificent, terrifying universe, to remain attuned to the whispers of ancient horrors and the chilling implications of humanity's precarious place in an indifferent cosmos, please subscribe for more Lovecraft videos and join our growing legion of those who dare to peer into the abyss. Your continued support allows us to bring these narratives to life, to explore the subtle nuances and profound terrors that lie within the pages of the Master's work, ensuring that the legacy of cosmic dread continues to thrive, unsettling minds and provoking thought long after the final word has been spoken. Thank you for venturing with us into the bleak, fascinating world of H.P. Lovecraft.